We're talking about the way of the cross, and we're using the 7 words of Jesus to explain what that means and what that really is. And to be honest, as we kind of think about this, there's a part of us that really shouldn't want to be taking this journey at all, right? I mean, we're talking about the way of the cross. We're talking about the way to a place of execution. We're talking about discipleship, as Eugene Peterson says, is learning how to die. I don't think maybe we fully appreciate what crucifixion meant at the time of Jesus. I mean, obviously it's a means of execution, and obviously that's bad enough. But generally, the Romans saved crucifixion as kind of a special way of execution. It wasn't just about killing the criminal, giving the punishment, but they saved crucifixion for those they wanted to make an example of, particularly in a political way. It was generally reserved for those who were rebelling or revolting against Rome, and especially those who were inciting others to rebel. So for these failed rebels, these failed revolutionaries, the Romans would execute them in a public way. They would take them outside the city, along a major road, beside an entryway, a gate into the city, with a sign over the criminal's head stating what they did, and that's what they did to Jesus. They took him outside the city, major road, next to a gate and entryway, and they crucified him with a sign above his head, the King of the Jews. Crucifixion was really Rome's way of saying, it was a billboard, it was advertisement, it was propaganda. It was Rome's way of saying, don't mess with us. This is what happens to those who mess with us. When the Romans destroyed Jerusalem 40 years or so after the time of Jesus, they crucified hundreds of people all around the city as a way of proclaiming, of stating, not just to the people there, but to the nations and the regions surrounding, this is what happens when you mess with us. These are the failures, these failed rebels, these failed revolutionaries, and this is what happens to them. So to be on a cross is to be a failure, is to be ashamed. And this is why Paul, when he talks about the message of the cross, and he brings a message of the cross in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, he calls it a stumbling block to Jews. He calls it foolishness to Gentiles. Nobody should want to hear a message about a cross. That's for failures. That's for people who are ashamed. There was found in Rome an ancient piece of graffiti. And this ancient piece of graffiti, there's graffiti covering a lot of the walls of things that archaeologists uncover, ancient sites and ancient places. There's graffiti that covers a lot of it. And they found this piece of graffiti that showed a person worshiping a figure with a head of a donkey hanging on a cross. And there's a little caption there in the graffiti, and it says, Alexander worships his God. And the Romans obviously were mocking these Christians who, why would you worship a God who is crucified? Why would you worship a God who's a failure? Why would you worship a God who's ashamed? As ashamed as Jesus was, stripped naked, hanging from a piece of wood for all to see and to mock. But as we said in the last session, the cross enables us to be honest about ourselves. And here I think it enables us to be honest about our failures. And we be honest to say that we are failures. Hanging on either side of Jesus are 2 failures, are 2 failed rebels, 2 failed revolutionaries. I know we often refer to them merely as thieves, but these guys aren't pickpockets. These guys didn't grab an extra piece of fruit from the market, stand. No, crucifixion was not for, simple crimes like this. Crucifixion was a political statement. These weren't simple thieves. These were revolutionaries, and they were armed robbers to support that rebellion, that revolutionary. And one of these failures said something to Jesus that we would kind of expect. A failure, a rebel, to say to Jesus. Hanging right next to him, another failed rebel, apparently. He said, "You're supposed to be the Messiah. You're supposed to be the one we've been waiting for. You're supposed to be the one that we're hoping for. What are we all doing here if you're the one we've been waiting for?" It was like John the Baptist years before. And John the Baptist is in prison, and he's about to be beheaded for speaking out against Herod. And he sends two of his disciples to Jesus and ask him, "Are you the one we've been waiting for, or is there someone else yet to come?" And John the Baptist is kind of thinking, if Jesus is the Messiah, if he is the Christ, if he's the king that we've been waiting for all this time to come and redeem us, then what am I doing in prison? And this failed rebel hanging next to Jesus says pretty much the same thing. If you're the Christ, if you're the king, if you're the one we've been waiting for, what are we doing here? But the other one says something incredible to Jesus. The other failure. He says to someone hanging on a cross right next to him, struggling to breathe just as much as he is, knowing he's going to die just as he is, he says to him, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." How unbelievable is that? How crazy is that? That this man would look at somebody who is in the process of being executed as a failure and say, "Yeah, I know you're coming into your kingdom. Remember me when that happens." Somehow, some way, that failed rebel saw victory where others saw defeat. He saw a coronation to a kingdom when others only saw shame. He understood. How he understood, I have no idea. But he understood the hopeful aspect of the kingdom of God, that what God is doing in the world requires trust. It requires the kind of hope that sees beyond present suffering. And to this failed rebel, to this shamed revolutionary, Jesus says the second word from the cross. He says, "Today you will be with me in paradise." This word that teaches us that Jesus is setting us free from our failures and from our shame. In Romans chapter 5, verses 6 through 11, a text that you should read entirely, Paul reminds us who we used to be. And here are the words that he used for us. This is who we used to be. These 4 words: powerless, ungodly, sinner, an enemy. It's who we used to be. It's what Jesus is setting us free from. Our failure, our shame, and the fact that we were God's enemy. But it's failures like us, right? We can be honest with ourselves. It's failures like us that God is restoring and reconciling. To himself. This is how that section in Romans chapter 5, verse 6 through 11, this is how that section ends. This is verse 10 and 11. It says, "For if, while we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his Son, how much more, having been reconciled, shall we be saved through his life. Not only is this so, but we also boast in God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have now received reconciliation. We were his enemies. We were failures. We had shame. We should have been cast out from the family, and yet God is reconciling us to him. He is bringing us back home. Think about the parable of the prodigal son. The son who wastes his father's inheritance wildly, comes home as a failure, as shame, and says, if only my father will accept me as a slave, as a servant, that will be better than my current life. And yet the father is reconciled to him. He brings him back home, throw the robe on him, put the ring back on his finger. He is my son. And because God is reconciling us to him, we can have hope. And that's where hope comes from. It doesn't come from a wish, doesn't come from a longing. It comes from reconciliation. It comes from a relationship that we have with God. Earlier in that passage in Romans 5, Paul says that we can boast in our hope. It will not put us to shame. So what the cross is empowering us to do is to move from shame to hope, knowing that that hope will pay off in the end. And to that one failed rebel, that hope came. And it came today. Today, you'll be with me in paradise. This hope will pay off. This hope you can take to the bank. This is not some kind of wish fulfillment that you're kind of longing for. We kind of use the language we're hoping for, but we don't really know is actually going to happen. This hope we can be confident in. This hope we know will be fulfilled in the end. The difference between a wish and a hope is, I think, really how it affects you presently, how it affects you today, right? It's the difference between someone who wishes they would win the lottery, right? You play the lottery, you wish that you win, but you're not going to start spending that money today, right? Because you don't know if you're going to win. In fact, the odds are majorly stacked against you from winning. So only a crazy person would start spending the money from a lottery when they've not won, right? That's a wish. A hope is the son or daughter of a millionaire, a billionaire, who knows that this is the kind of inheritance I'm going to get one day. And so I feel free now, as the son or daughter of a millionaire or billionaire, to start spending that money now, because I know it's coming my way, ultimately. The person inheriting a fortune is already spending it today. That's what confidence brings us. That's what a reconciliation to a Father who is giving us all these blessings, who can provide us this level of hope, and can empower us to start spending that money today. We have been reconciled to God. Our failures have been erased. We are sons and daughters of the King. And we know the kind of inheritance we'll be getting, to the point we're even able to start spending it today. And this is how we do that. This is how we spend the inheritance today. It's when we go through a time of suffering. It's when we go through a time of suffering and we hold on to our hope. How we handle suffering shows us just how real our hope is. That when life takes away all the kinds of things that we tend to put our present comfort in, all the kinds of things that we put our future hope in, health, I hope, I wish I can continue to be healthy. My family, I hope that we'll continue to have a good relationship down the road. Our accomplishments, I hope I have some accomplishments down the road. Honor, financial success. When life takes those things away, when life takes a family member away, either through death or through estrangement because of something that somebody did once, when life takes those things away, hope gives us eternal, infinite resources to sustain us. And that's how we start spending our inheritance today. The old Puritan minister, Richard Baxter, 17th century guy, was undergoing a severe kind of suffering with his health. And in fact, his doctors had basically given him up for dead. He was only going to last a little while longer. And so he began this practice, that moment, that he was going to start consciously thinking about heaven. He was going to focus, he was going to intentionally think and reflect about what heaven, what paradise, it's what Jesus promised, right? What paradise will be. He ended up actually recovering from that illness, maybe even miraculously. And he lived almost 50 years longer. But even after he recovered, he continued that practice. And every day, for about a half hour, he would take a walk right before dinner, and he would think about paradise. He would think about this hope that he has because he's been reconciled to a God that loves him and is giving him this incredible inheritance. So here's the exercise that I want you to try. Okay? We are so inundated in our world with present stuff, right? Present news, right? 24-hour news cycle, 24-hour news channel. CNN, MSNBC, Fox. We're surrounded by news constantly. And when there isn't really anything interesting, they invent things, right? Or they blow things out of proportion, right? And if that's not enough, then we're surrounded by kind of sort of local news, local in terms of my family and friends, the people that I follow, the people I'm friends with, whatever that means in the social media world, right? We're inundated with present, with what's happening right now. So much so that I think it affects us and it blinds us to the very real hope that we have in the future. So here's the exercise. For the next week or so, right, longer would be better, but at least for the next week, take the time that you spend focusing on what's happening now. The time you spend watching 24-hour news, time you spend on your phone, device, computer, checking social media, what's happening with all my friends around me, all the people I follow. Take that time and think about what eternity will be like. So put away your phone, turn off the TV, open a Bible, meditate, think, reflect. You look at passages like Isaiah 35, or Isaiah 65, or Revelation 21, 22, and meditate and think about, reflect on what paradise will be, the future that we have. And think about how that affects how you deal with the normal struggle of daily life, and even the crisis that can happen often in life. One of the major issues that I think that we have with holding on to our hope when we go through a time of suffering is that we really haven't ever trained ourselves to think beyond our present situation. When we're always focused on what's happening now, that doesn't help us. And so when some of those present blessings, health, family, friends, accomplishments, money, when one of those things is taken away, or maybe we throw it away as failures, we don't have the capacity to endure beyond our present moment because we've never really trained ourselves to think about the future, think about our eternal future. We cannot bring this about by ourselves. We cannot bring paradise by ourselves. Despite how well things might be going for you right now at the moment, you can't bring this about by yourself. It's that kind of thinking that got Adam and Eve kicked out of paradise. It was that kind of thinking that led to these two failures, these two revolutionaries who were hanging right next to Jesus. It only comes because of an incredible God who reconciles us to him despite our failures, despite our shame, gives us a hope of an inheritance that will never perish, spoil, or fade, kept in heaven for us. It's 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 4. That's much more important for you to think about that, to reflect on that. That's much more important for you to spend time thinking about and what's happening right now. We have paradise awaiting us. Despite our many failures, despite our shame, we have paradise waiting for us. And that's the blessing for disciples of Jesus who are following him, walking in the way of the cross.